How much death benefit do you actually need? Well, the answer is it depends. Depends on what we're going to be using the death benefit for. We can use it to protect ourselves and our family and even our business, but we can also use it to protect our insurability. Enjoy this episode as we explain how much death benefit you actually need.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast, where we teach clients how to build wealth and create passive income without the risk of Wall Street.
Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso, and today we're going to be talking about how much death benefit you actually need.
Before we dive into that, we wanted to share a couple things that we have working and what we're going to start doing, or we actually have been.
Yeah.
We just haven't been promoting it. When we do an interview on our podcast, we've been live streaming it on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. In addition, every third Thursday of the month at noon Pacific, we're going to do a live Q&A, which you can literally ask us anything about IBC or creating passive income. And we're also, in addition to answering your questions, we're going to be talking and sharing, maybe there's some new ideas or some new thoughts or kind of some new things going on. So in order to not miss those, go ahead and like our Facebook page, and the best would be on the YouTube. If you subscribe, you'll be notified every time that we go live.
Make sure you bring your good questions. We're going to be grilling Anthony the third Thursday of every month, and we're going to call it Stump the Chump.
Oh, man, that was a good one.
That was good.
That was a good one.
That was good.
Now, let's get back to business.
All right, fine.
Okay, today we're talking about what everybody loves talking about is death benefit.
Yes.
Right, and often people don't know how much they need.
No.
And Cameron, would you say when you meet somebody, do they typically have more than enough, just right amount, or not enough?
It's either not enough or literally just the bare minimums. Usually when I'm talking to somebody, I'll ask them, hey, do you have existing insurance in place? And a lot of times they say yes, and then I'll ask how they got that amount, and they give me that same look. Exactly. I don't know, right? It's usually a round number. I got 500,000. I got $1 million in place. There's no kind of way that they actually calculated that. It's just a round number, and it sounds good most of the time. But we do need to, or we can calculate how much death benefit somebody actually needs. The most typical way, the most traditional way to calculate, kind of weigh the amount of insurance that somebody qualifies for, is you will take how much money they make, their annual income, and you'll multiply that by the number of working years that they have left. So usually, say somebody is 50 years old, they've got 20 years of work left, and they make $100,000. Anthony, that's 20 years at $100,000. That's $2 million.
$2 million, thanks.
Exactly. Yeah, you're welcome. So that's kind of how you will back into kind of the most that they need. So that's a good starting point.
What if they have some passive income already?
If they have some passive income, you can just subtract that from the earned income amount. So in this case, if somebody's making 100 and they have 20,000 of passive income, the multiple would be 80 times whatever their working years are.
Okay, now I like where you're going, but a lot of people are feeling this pinch with inflation.
Ooh.
So how is inflation going to calculate that?
Inflation is actually going to reduce the amount of death benefit that somebody has in the future. We were looking at numbers earlier, and let's say that in 10 years, somebody has 100,000 at 3% inflation. That 100,000 in 10 years actually feels more like 75,000. So today, when somebody says, I've got 250,000 or 500,000, if we fast forward 10, 15, even 20 years, that's not going to be the same 250, the same 500,000. It's not going to be enough.
Right, and the numbers you were using was just a 3% inflation rate.
Oh, yeah.
And as everybody can attest to, it's much higher than that. So that inflation is going to be key when we are calculating that.
Yeah.
Now, Cameron, what if the, you know what I've noticed typically with a lot of our clients, if they're married, one's kind of the driver with the investor. Maybe one person's overviewing the money. The other person many times really has no idea kind of what's going on. Now, should there be a difference do we take that into account if somebody's an investor or non-investor when we're getting the death benefit?
I would say yes, right? If we're looking at somebody that is the investor, I think that you could probably get away with having less insurance on them. And the reason that I would say that is because I don't want this to sound inappropriate, but they've got that skill set. They have that ability to go and create more. If somebody that is not an investor, right, I don't know, maybe we need a little bit more to be able to kind of pay everything off and just get us to kind of that break-even point.
Well, one thing you said is we could get by with that. So
there's a difference between getting
Right.
by and then also kind of, I don't want to say thriving, but getting ourselves in a position that is going to allow us to kind of get through life at that point. It's not a great scenario that we're discussing, right? If one spouse passes and, there's going to be some grief and things that we need to deal with to kind of move forward there.
And, another thing we need to take into account is somebody gets a windfall of money.
Yeah.
What have you seen? Does that impact their financial decisions?
It does absolutely impact their financial decisions. A long time ago, man, it's been a while since I've looked at this, I remember a statistic that it was something crazy that most widows or surviving spouses spend, I want to say it was like 50% of the death benefit in the first 18 months. It was a kind of an astounding number, right, to think about how much money they're spending. But if you put it in perspective, right, let's say somebody, does have a $2 million death benefit in place, it can go pretty quickly, right? If you think about $2 million, it sounds like a lot, but man, if somebody goes and pays off the balance of the house, they put some money away for kids' college, right? They probably go and upgrade their lifestyle a little bit, right? Anthony,
Go ahead.
I was going to say that, right, if one spouse if you're not a spender and you come into $2 million, you're probably going to be a spender to some extent at that point. And so lifestyle tends to creep up regardless of the situation. So, right, there's a lot of factors that kind of come into play there.
Yeah, we don't know how that surviving spouse or how we're going to react, And one thing we could, I'm assuming the surviving spouse is mourning, right, and hurting. They may be more apt to spend to try to make them feel better.
Make them feel better, kids feel better, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at, I've got lots of insurance in place on myself, right? Several millions of dollars of insurance on myself, and I have several millions of dollars in place on my spouse. And I think of the scenario in which my spouse were to pass is I have no intention of going back to work kind of anytime soon, right? I mean, my intention, my concern, and my prayer at that point is going to be being home, taking care of the kids, and helping them get through all that stuff. And so I personally need a lot of death benefit in place on my spouse because, man, she runs our household. So if somebody was missing there, I've got to go hire somebody or work less or a combination of both.
Yeah, I think it's important for that non-working spouse that we need to have some death benefit on them.
Yeah.
And I know we were fortunate enough where my wife didn't have to work outside the house. And you know what? There were times where she kind of felt guilty. Like, hey, I don't feel like I'm contributing. But I'm like, whoa. Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Because she's running the household, managing the kids. She's, if something goes wrong, repairs, she's kind of calling and coordinating that stuff. And because of that, it allows me to work more.
Yeah.
So if, God forbid, she weren't around, either I'm going to have to work less or I'm going to have to hire somebody.
Yeah.
But either way, there's going to be a financial dilemma. And the last thing I want is, on top of losing my loved one, to have to worry about money.
Yeah.
Right? Let's see. Now, let's see where we're at. Now, let's talk about, so we got this options here when let's put it on ourselves, right?
Mhm.
We're going to get a death benefit on ourselves. Oftentimes we've said that you got a few choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can leave your family worse off, financially in the same position, or better off. And I know as we were preparing for this, you told me you were going to argue somewhere here, so I'm getting ready for your thoughts.
Well, if you look at those three options, right?
Yeah.
Better, worse, or the same. I don't think you can have a life event such as that and be in the same position. I don't think really the same status quo is even an option to be considered, to be honest. I mean, it's going to change. It's going to be better, right? If we've prepared for this scenario, and if we haven't, it's going to get much worse, unfortunately. So that's my argument.
Well, and what I'm even talking with my kids on this now. Money's just a tool, right? That's not going to determine your happiness. But that tool makes it much easier to be happy.
Yeah.
In a lot of situations, and so when we're coming like a situation like this, last thing we want to be, if we could just take off the financial burden, that's going to allow our family to heal. Right?
Well said. What we just discussed was kind of option one, which is really replacing the income. Not only replacing the income on the working spouse, but also potentially the non-working spouse and how much of a priority that is. Anthony, I was going to throw it to you. I was going to ask you some questions on option two, which is really kind of protecting your insurability. So if you could, tell the listeners what that idea means or what we're saying there.
What it means is if we're practicing infinite banking, like truly practicing it, you are going to need additional policies. Now, that could be you're kind of like starting off a little too small. Like what I did. I was like, this sounds too good to be true.
Yeah.
Does this really work? So I got a small policy, put my toe in the water. And once I felt comfortable, then I got another policy, and I started getting more. But or maybe you started with the right size policy, but you're incorporating some of these strategies to build income, and you're making more money.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to need more places to put money. So ideally, we're going to need another policy. And one advantage is getting what's called convertible term insurance, which we're all familiar with term insurance. We're kind of renting it, right? But if you get the death benefit, let's just say, let's stick with that $2 million. If you have a $2 million death benefit, insurance companies don't care if it's term or if it's whole life. What they care about is that the underwriting is properly done and the premiums are appropriate, right? So if we get that $2 million of term when we're healthy, right? Because typically we don't get healthier as we age.
No, we don't.
But I will tell you, when I got my first policy, I had no idea what an A1C was.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm finding that A1C is a precursor to diabetes. And instead of me getting preferred plus, I've had some policies that came back at standard because of that. Now, but really, the difference between preferred plus and standard on the way we design these policies, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? But there's also the case where it could be worse. Right? Where maybe I am uninsurable.
Yeah.
Or maybe I can still work, but maybe I had some prostate cancer, or I got a severe case of type 2 diabetes, or maybe early onslaught of Parkinson's, or something where I can still work, but I can't get an additional death benefit. With that convertible term, I can convert that to whole life no matter what my health is. I could be terminally ill, and I can convert that. Right? Also, I will say, well, I know now with some of the insurance companies, an exam is not required. But when it is, it's a little bit of a burden. You got to get examined. We got to get medical records, and sometimes doctors are no longer practicing, and we're trying to chase all that stuff. So getting that convertible term, in addition to protecting that family, will allow us for when we're ready for that next policy, where not only do we guarantee that we're going to get approved, but also we don't have to go through underwriting again.
Yeah.
You know?
So when you're talking about kind of that next policy, a lot of times, right, somebody's going to get it through maybe an increase in income, right? What you talked about was aging, right? As we get better at what we do, our income is going to increase over time. I remember my first policy, my premium was $5,000 a year. And that was a pretty big deal, right?
Yeah.
And now you look at the premiums that you're paying, and it's not so much of a big deal, right? But that's 13, 14 years ago now. So it's going to increase over time. What else can you use that convertible term for?
Well, a lot of times again, so we're going to use it to convert it against eventually. Part of that plan is how much do we need?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, the first thing we want to do is protect the family.
Yeah.
But sometimes we might need more death benefit because we have these larger windfalls. And there's one client of mine that I'm thinking of where he's expecting 2 windfalls of some investments that these companies will go public in the next year or two. So we're anticipating these windfalls of cash. So we're planning now for him to store it. So we kind of backed into the death benefit, assuming that those pay out like we planned. How much death benefit do we need? And then that determined how much term insurance he needed. And it happened to be more than what he needed to replace his income.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to take some advantages of those future windfalls.
Yeah. I would say, man, just this week, I've had 2 existing clients call up. Actually, both policies we've placed within the year.
Mm-hmm.
And they are looking to open a premium deposit fund, right? They've came into a windfall. One of them sold a real estate property, and then the other one is actually investing into another business. So he's moving some funds, and so called us up and said, hey, is this a scenario where we might want to use that premium deposit fund, that one and done design where we run the money through and then move into one of those things? So one client has got a term policy in place. We're converting it. We're literally just sending the check along with issue instructions for the new policy. Plain and simple. The second one, we're actually opening up a new application, start underwriting. So that one's going to need a little bit of kind of timeline's going to be a little extended just to get through the underwriting process. So, Anthony, what I would add right here is I think now is a great spot for any of our clients that are listening, right, that maybe they don't have a convertible term policy in place, or maybe somebody is listening right now and they don't have any infinite banking policies in place, but it's something that they want to do in the future. Guys, if this is you, feel free to reach out to us. We'll give you some options on putting a convertible term policy in place. And just for preparation, right? For preparing when you guys are ready to get started or preparing for some sort of windfall. So feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to kind of go through some options with you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, let's
Yes.
touch on kind of the design, right? So that's kind of the traditional way. The way that we design policies is a little bit different. How does the way that we design policies kind of impact the death benefit?
Well, I would say if we compare it to where a typical financial planner is going to determine it, they're focused on the death benefit, right? And then they're backing in to what the premium is. We're doing things the exact opposite. The way we design it, the premium is determined by you. We're backing into the death benefit.
Yeah.
So it's very different, which means what I would like to point out is our goal here is not necessarily to have a large amount of death benefit. Our goal is to leverage that cash value to buy the assets we're going to buy anyways. But by running it through the policy, as we've had much content in, you're going to have more cash at the end of the day. Well, we don't talk much about death benefit.
No.
Right? But you're going to have a lot more death benefit just by buying these assets you already have. Right? So that's how we determine the death benefit. Is how much cash can we get in there and this still be tax-free whatever the death benefit required to do that, that's the number we use. Sometimes that is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So we just easily supplement that by getting convertible term insurance.
Yeah.
And, partly how, again, when we're designing that policy, you are determining the premium, and that could be done in a few ways. Most of the time, we have some sort of monthly amount, but we also may have some money on the side, maybe from an investment, or maybe a lot of people are saving up money and they just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And they're accumulating that. And maybe you have what we call mini windfalls, meaning maybe your income is variable, it's seasonal, or maybe you expect a bonus to come in, but you determine the numbers or what you feel comfortable putting in the policy, and that's how we back into the death benefit.
Well said, Anthony. Guys, so today what we talked about was really the death benefit, right? How we can calculate it, how much you actually need. Several factors that we discussed. The first one is just to replace your income,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's pretty straightforward. The second piece is that protection of the insurability, right? Is you may be insurable now, today, but you may not be insurable tomorrow. Putting that convertible term policy in place is a great way to preserve that insurability, and it also gives us that opportunity to convert that when we're presented with any sort of windfall. So if you guys don't have that in place right now, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to help you have a conversation around that. And anything else, Anthony?
I would say, I didn't even tell you this, Cameron. I was on a discovery call yesterday, and they were disappointed that I was the one on the call. Right?
I don't know if I believe you quite yet. I feel like there's a punchline coming.
Well, there is, but all right.
Yeah.
But he's like, I was really hoping I was going to talk to Cameron, and
he had some
I was speechless.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm looking for help of ways to create passive income, but I'm also looking for help to get some silky smooth hair. Right? That's exactly what he said. Now, whether he was serious or joking, I don't know. But you got some questions to get on the call, and you can talk to us about passive income or how to get silky smooth hair.
Yeah.
Now go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next episode. Also, check out our website, infinitewealthconsultants.com, to find our podcast along with other additional resources.